Hello, everyone. Jambo, Nabari. Africa holds a special part in my heart because I was born in East Africa. And, well, pretty well the first mountains I ever heard of were East African mountains, Kilimanjaro, of course, but the almost mythical mountains of the moon held a special fascination for me because I studied a lot of history at school. And, when the Europeans started moving out into Africa and exploring it with, from a modern perspective, one of the great mysteries was the source of the Nile, and there's actually a lot of jostling as to who would finally find the source of the Nile. But most sensible people prophesized that the source would be somewhere up in the so-called mountains of the moon. But no European ever seen them, and it took quite some time before they did. And then they followed a variety of explorations. Eventually, of course, mountaineers got involved because the Rwenzori, as they later became named, represent the third highest protuberance on the Earth's surface in Africa. And the highest peak is Mount Stanley. Well, the highest mountain is Mount Stanley. Got two peaks, and the highest peak being Margherita Peak, which you can see here. It's pretty well slap bang on the equator, which makes it even more remarkable because it's got, as you can see, well, that's permanent snow, if you didn't realize that. They're glaciers. They have been slowly shrinking since the end of the Little Ice Age, but who knows what will happen in the future. It's the most fascinating part of the world in any case. And I would say it is unique in terms of mountain trekking. There's nothing else like it at all. Uganda is also a fascinating country. It's often called the Pearl of East Africa, and I'd have to agree. Much of it is at quite high altitude, therefore receives quite good rainfall. Much of the soils are volcanic, being on the rim of the Great Rift Valley that runs right across south to North Africa. And the Rwenzori actually right on the edge of the Rift Valley. Unlike a lot of most of the higher African mountains, the Rwenzori are not volcanic. They're a result of a crustal uplift, and they're composed of, metamorphic rocks, lots of them. So when you book on a trip to the Rwenzori, you obviously fly into Entebbe, and there, I'll have to turn that down a bit. Sorry about that. Bit of nightlife in Entebbe. It's a great city. Spent a couple of days in, but there you will be treated to a briefing by the trekking company that we use over there before driving for 7 or 8 hours to the base of the Rwenzori. This is back in Kampala, having a briefing at the hotel before heading off across the Ugandan countryside. Stunning landscape, and driving is a great way of seeing the country. Obviously, you can fly, but driving is much better. You go past the Queen Elizabeth National Park. This is actually a photo of an elephant I took from the road. So, yeah. And our destination is a township of Port Portal or Kasisi, depending on what the itinerary is, but you stay in a hotel there after the 7 or 8 hours drive. And then we drive up to the base of the mountain where the operator there has a base. Now, up until about 10 years ago, there was only one route into the high peaks of the Rwenzori, and it was notoriously boggy, and basically you went in and almost came out the same way. But about 15, maybe 20 years ago, an Australian guy who happened to be living over there decided to do something different. And he managed to convince the Ugandan National Parks and Tourism Board to allow him to give him a concession to put in another track, a circuit. And he's obviously good operator because one of his proposals was that he would bring employment to the local people. Anyway, cut a long story short, it's been very successful. He's got his own tracks and series of huts up there, and he's basically saved the economy of the local town of Kalembe, the little village of Kalembe. It's got a few hundred people in it. There was a copper, or there is a copper mine there, but it hasn't been in operation due to various reasons, some of them geological, some of them weather-related. So the local people are really grateful that they've got this opportunity to be engaged in mountain tourism. And his team there, incredibly well-trained. They've had professional guides from South Africa and Europe come in and train them about glacier travel and high rescue, although it's not a technical route. There is a bit of glacier travel. There's very well-versed ornithologists, botanists, and the guides there are exceptional. I'd rate them as good as any guides in the natural world anywhere, and I've trekked in a lot of places. So here we have a bit more of a close-up of the route in from Kalembe up. And this is the network of trails that John Hunwick, through his organisation, has put in. None of these existed before he came along. And in the boggy places, they're mostly got boardwalks, which makes trekking a lot more comfortable. This area, being high mountains, I mean, most of it's above 2,500 or 3,000 metres. And being on the edge of the Rift Valley to the east of the Congo Basin, it receives an enormous amount of rain. So any piece of flat ground is basically a bog. And it's got a lot of peat built up over tens of thousands of years, which, of course, if you walk over peat for long enough, it'll turn into a bog, into a slushy bog. So, and in between the flat places, there are not very many of them, but any sort of level bit is filled with this peaty soil. And then there's rocks, and there's just rocks ever. It's an incredibly, I don't think I've trekked in the Karakoram a lot. Karakoram is very rugged, just rocky, very rocky landscape. Well, the Rwenzori is even rockier, but all the gaps between the rocks are filled with peat, and then that of course got vegetation growing on top of it, which makes it a very interesting landscape. But these trails would have been very difficult finding the routes, and he used a lot of local knowledge. Some of it derived from, actually employed poachers who had been poaching in the national park. He convinced them that they would find better, more gainful employment as trekking guides or porters. And so he's turned the poaching into tourism, which is another win. Here we are at the start of the trail into the national park. That's John there. He didn't travel with us because he was busy back in town, but you begin in this, it's a paradise, really. It's just a beautiful forest, very lush, of course. And the great thing for Australians and people who trekked in Asia is that, you'd expect a lot of leeches to occur in this sort of habitat, but there are none. No leeches in Africa, which is incredible. And nothing biting either. You'll see some of these lovely lizards and chameleons. If you keep your eyes peeled, they are very well camouflaged. It's fascinating to see them change colour. There is wildlife there, but the forest being so thick, quite hard to spot. A typical example of the amount of effort they put into the trails. You might see colobus monkeys, you might see blue monkeys, red duiker, but most of the wildlife that you'll see is bird life if you keep your eyes peeled. Our first, there's another example of that, the track clearing that's occurred. Sadly, there's no elephant left in the park. They were obliterated back in the early 70s when, poaching got ramped up by Tanzania's invasion of Uganda to oust Idi Amin. And for a while, they were held up in the Rwenzori Mountains, and they did a lot of poaching. And basically, that's when the forest elephant disappeared. But the forest elephant used to keep these, we used to make trails through the forest. Would have been a lot easier traveling through them back then. So after walking for maybe 500-600 meters uphill, you come to the first camp, which is Sine Camp. Now, I say camp, all the camps on this trek are in huts because it'd be incredibly rugged, not to mention quite damaging to the landscape if you just had tents, because there's not much flat ground. What flat ground there is boggy. So it's much more sensible to have a fixed camp. And all the camps are very well provisioned with bunk beds, a dining room, a kitchen, toilets. Some of them have showers. After Sine Camp, another walk through the forest upwards, some of it very steep. Well, the route we did was up an ancient moraine ridge covered in forest before you get to Kalalama Camp, which is nestled on the top of a spur, flat bit of spur. And if it's clear, you can actually see right down to the Rift Valley, Queen Elizabeth National Park. But you may get a clear evening when you get there. But so typically the weather's clear. If you're lucky, the weather's clear in the morning, cloudy in the afternoon. And an example the next day of a bit of a rockier section where no boardwalks are necessary. In fact, we're still below the area of bogs. It's still mainly rocky because the slopes are steep. And these trees you see are actually a variety of heather, but they grow to gigantic proportions. A little bit of bog there. You can see some track work being put in there. And then here we see what becomes more regular as you get up high into the above the tree zone, where you've got this really weird vegetation of giant lobelias and senecio. This is Kalalama Camp. From here, the crew in the kitchen, and they do a great job catering. Food's good. From here, you can do a couple of hour excursion to get there early, up to a lookout point, very steep, so there's a few ladders in place, but Matinda Lookout, which is this place, great vantage point. You can see how rugged the landscape is. It's otherworldly, it really is. Very unusual. Sunbird in a lobelia. Lobelia is a fascinating plant, a huge floral spike, which grows out of this clump. Battling away through a little bit of tussock country, which probably boggy underfoot, and interspersed between the bogs are the rocky sections, again illustrating how, well, not only how beautiful the landscape is, but how rugged it is. And you can imagine traveling through here without a track being there, trying to work out where the best route was, avoiding little lakes and bottomless bogs and vertical sections of rock. We can actually do a side trip up here, which we did. Nice viewpoint before getting to the next camp, which is Bugata Camp. And here we can see a lot of evidence of glaciation from the past. It's like 4,000 meters above sea level, so you're starting to feel the altitude. And you can see here a pair of, well, they're actually gumboots, I'll tell you, they're gumboots. That is the recommended footwear for trekking in the Rwenzori. Yeah, gumboots. I found the best gumboots to be ones that sailors use. They're lightweight, they're lined, easy to take on and off, and very comfortable to walk in. The reason I'd say gumboots are better than, say, leather boots and gaiters is that sometimes, despite the boardwalks, you do find yourself going more than ankle deep in the mud. So, gumboots are a good idea to trek in. And looking out from Bugata Camp, lovely clear evening, crew in the kitchen preparing dinner, and the next day's walk takes us up into the sort of semi-alpine zone with the giant senecio. The fascinating, well, it's a member of the daisy family, but it grows up to, well, nearly 5 meters high in some cases. And then we go over a pass named after one of the first locals who was employed as a guide back in the early part of the last century, who I'm sure he'd been a bit of a poacher, but he was quite old at the time when he was employed. I think it was a Belgian expedition but anyway, Bamjanwara was his name, and the pass is named after him. And from there, you get your first glimpse of the high peaks of the Rwenzori. You've got Mount Stanley here, highest point, Margherita Peak, Mount Speke over here. And the route now drops down into this valley. We're right on the border with the Congo Republic. The DRC border runs along right about there. And this chap here in the green, with the green beret, is there just to make sure that everything's okay with us. He's actually from the army, and the army employed in the park to police poaching, but also their presence is a deterrence to anyone who wants to, any of the sort of militia who want to come up from the DRC. Lots of irregular types down there. It's a bit of a bit disorganized down in the DRC in terms of the security. So it's good to see the army presence up here in the Rwenzori, because they do keep it secure. And, it's fine because they're there. Makes you feel a lot safer. The route goes down to the valley and then around into this valley over here and over up around the back of Mount Stanley, passing a few lakes along the way. One of the less, there's still got to see, the track's not too boggy there, but you can see it's a little bit slippery. And eventually we get to Hunwick's camp, which is about 400, just under 4,000 meters actually. So again, very comfortable. Big mess tent with a stove because it's getting quite cool now, and you appreciate having a bit of heat. It's either you burn wood, which is brought up from below, or coke, which is brought up from below. So, and then from here, continue past the Katandra Lakes, around to the pass below the last point which is up here. See the track winding its way up through here to this pass, and then that passes here. And Margherita Camp is the last sort of place we sleep at, which is at just under 4,500 meters. So sometimes it can be snowy there, sometimes no snow, but again, very comfortable. And it's here that we launch our summit bid. Of course, it depends on the weather. And but even if it's snowy, if you're cautious, the guides know the route so well. And in slippery places, there's a fixed cable or rope, there's ladders. You can virtually climb it in any conditions. It's just a matter of how much discomfort you're prepared to put up with. But because there's a bit of glacier to traverse, you do require some technical gear. You don't require any technical knowledge, because the staff will brief you here at Margherita Camp on what happens in the next day during the ascent. How to you practice putting your crampons on, wearing a harness, using your ascender on the fixed rope, and how to attach safely, and so on and so forth. And after that briefing, you have an early dinner, early to bed, and you're woken up at about 1 a.m., maybe 12:30, before heading up the mountain under the light of your headlamp. When we went, it was a few years ago, it was perfectly clear. Starlit sky, we were thinking how lucky we were. Just as it got light, the cloud descended and didn't lift for a few days. So we got to the top in a snowstorm, and it was actually a thunderstorm, so there's a bit of static electricity about. Anyway, it's just a matter of luck, really. Would have been nice to have a view from the top looking down into the Congo Basin, but on that occasion we were unlucky. Very nice to get back to camp and have a cup of tea, and then from there descend, not spend the night there, bit uncomfortable sleeping at altitude because they're not that well acclimatized. Heading back down to Hunwick's camp, where you get a much better sleep. Quite a long day, that summit day, because, well, you go from 1:30 till, probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we return via a different route, which goes over a pass called Oliver's Pass and drops into another valley that we haven't seen. You can see the weather was continuing to be rather, well, typical, I'd say. Close up of a lobelia, very spectacular plant. These things are about 3 to 4 meters high. Typical scenery. Rugged. Down to the next camp, which in this case, there's quite a few on the way back, and you go a couple of different ways. This is Katandra, not Katandra, Kaharo camp. And they actually had it stocked with beer, which was very nice. Much appreciated after quite a long day, slog through a bit of bog and a lot of rain and mud and stuff. But yeah, gradually leaving the spectacular mountain scenery behind, entering the bamboo forest and then the thicker forest lower down before eventually coming out back on at the foot of the mountains. It just happened to be my 64th birthday back then, so there I am with a cake. Anyway, yeah, that last night's in a hotel, and the next day you can opt to have a drive through Queen Elizabeth National Park, and that's pretty well it. Of course, there's a lot more to see in Uganda, so I would highly recommend that you do something else, having gone all that way. You can go to a bit of a drive, maybe a 4 or 5 hour drive down to the windy, impenetrable forest, where sort of close to the border of Rwanda and the Virunga, an extension of the Virunga National Park and volcanoes, which you can see in the distance there, to stay at such as a place like this, which a nice lodge on the edge of a lake, before heading out to hopefully visit the gorillas that are there. It's an incredibly well-managed program. They limit the number of tourists. There's a lot of people who want it. It's very, very popular, but it's incredibly well organised so that the lives of the gorillas aren't too impacted by us humans ogling at them all the time. And they have rangers out there who track where the gorillas are, and then by radio inform the guides where you might be able to see the gorilla with their group, and then you go and see the gorillas. It's you get right up close to them. Yeah, every human should do it. Really incredible. And there are other places in Uganda, in the mountains as well. Mount Elgon, for instance, which the same company does add-ons for that, like a 3-day trek, I think. Anyway, that's it. Hopefully I've given you a little bit of an insight into, well, if you're a mountain lover, then it's a must. If you like trekking in the mountains, it's one of the places you've got to trek in. It's so different and fascinating. And I have to say, Ugandans, they seem a race apart. I mean, there's a lot of different tribes in Uganda, but when I got on the plane, obviously in Sydney, there are obviously a lot of Ugandans on the plane, and they're all talking. This is unusual. Maybe it's a club or something. Anyway, kept talking, and then we get in another flight, and everyone's still talking. Get to Uganda, everyone's talking to each other. Strangers are just talking to each other, and they come and talk to you. They're so friendly, and I realise it's just a national trait. Strangers just come up and talk to you, which it's really refreshing. I really enjoyed visiting Uganda. Highly recommend it. So that's it. Over to you, Brad.
That was fantastic, Tim. It's been on my radar, and you offered more than an insight. The usual Tim Macartney-Snape detail, and I'm sure everybody appreciated that. I just wanted to mention a couple of things before everyone looks for that Q&A button to be able to ask you a question. Just to mention, everyone, amazingly, this trip you only need 2 people to guarantee it to run. So just you and a buddy, and away you go. Some of Tim's trips require a lot more than that, but this isn't a Tim trip, sorry. But some trips are like that, and it's also daily departure, so it's a
Anyone there?
lot flexible. Yeah, we're still here, Tim. Can
Oh,
you hear?
sorry, I'd had my volume turned down.
The one question I wanted to ask you about the gumboots and blisters. Was there any concern about that? Like, what's your reaction to that?
None at all. No, none
They're
at all.
yeah, good.
In fact, no one got blisters on our trip. I mean, obviously, like any footwear, it's got to be well fitting. And I would suggest, the main cause of blisters is footwear that's too tight. And then, if you've got very soft skin on your feet, they're not worn into the footwear that you're wearing, then and there's a rough patch on the inside of your shoe, then you might get a blister. But no one got blisters anyway. The standard protocol for blisters is as soon as you feel any rubbing, and I mean any rubbing, it might seem trivial at the time, it's really, really important to stop, take your boots off, take your shoes, socks off, and tape up, because that will stop it. The longer you leave it, the more likely you'll get a blister. And then it's horrible. Like, no more apt saying than a stitch in time saves nine with blisters.
Good advice. Thank you, Tim. And just waiting for questions. One other one I had was, what other type of trips, that treks around the world do you think people should have done before they could consider doing a trip like this?
Well, being mountainous and going up a few thousand meters, then you do need to have done a lot of hill walking. That would be mandatory, because not only do you need the muscles developed for going uphill, but also going downhill. So doing a lot of up and down, and on sort of rougher terrain as well. The summit day, although it's not technical, it is rough, and there's a lot of scrambling. So, yeah, I would say hill walking with a bit of scrambling thrown in would prepare you well. And I don't think you necessarily have to done a lot of trekking, in terms of multi-day treks, but you do need to have done a lot of walking in the hills. That's for sure.
Okay, Tim, thank you. There's some questions coming in now. So, Christopher Ramsey, what time of year is considered the best? Do you have anything to say on that one?
Well, in East Africa, there's two so-called dry seasons. The middle of the year, of July, August, and the end of the year, December, January, into February. They're the best. The sort of two peak seasons. Having said that, even though they're the so-called dry seasons, it can rain at any time of year in the Rwenzori. So, but if you go within those two seasons, then you're more likely to get finer weather.
Okay. Jamie says, thanks for the presentation, Tim. How much gear do you need to carry during the trek?
Good question. You really don't need to carry much gear, because the porters carry your kit bag. So you have a kit bag with your spare clothes in it, and you need a day pack in which you'll carry your water bottle, camera, rain gear, and just maybe a snack. But there's plenty of food along the trip, and that's so maybe your day pack might weigh 8 kilograms or something. A spare jacket, obviously, as you're going up, conditions can get a lot colder at camp than they are from the last camp. So warm jacket, but that's about it. So minimal day pack.
Tim, you touched on food in that answer. Is there an ability to cater for dietary needs, gluten-free, for example?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
The strange thing is, right across sort of, Central Eastern Africa, the staple diet is a banana, the plantain, and but that's not the original. It didn't come from that area. It came from like the Malaysian Peninsula area originally. So it's interesting how food has moved around the world. But I must say that plantain it's an acquired taste, although we're not required to eat it on the trek.
Yeah, good. I'm a bit, I don't know about plantain, but I do love my bananas. Oh, look, there's a
They're
question
totally
here, but
different.
yeah, as what I've noticed in the taste. This question is probably more for our res department, Tim. Can you be picked up en route to Queen Elizabeth National Park instead of meeting in Entebbe? I think that's probably something, feel free to get in touch with our res team and, we can always try and help out with adjustments to itinerary where possible. But I don't know if you have anything to say on that at all, Tim.
Yes, totally, totally. I mean, Uganda is really quite a modern country, and travel there is not too bad, but yeah, certainly easy to communicate via email, mobile phone, WhatsApp, whatever, to arrange a pickup. So that's entirely possible, no problem at all. And the other thing is, of course, is that being a well-run company and having regular departures with guides who are well needing the work, the group size is I think a minimum of two. So if you just want to go there with a mate, great. That's just or a few mates, uh, do it because there's departures all the time, and they can well, in the busy season you might need to book ahead, but yeah, because it does get quite busy, and they structure it so that when you're trekking, you don't see anyone else on the trail. Well, there might be a group in front of you, there might be a group behind you, but in the peak season, otherwise, in other times, no, you can be the only people there.
Tim, that's awesome. I want to thank you for your time tonight. And if anyone has any more questions, get in touch with World Expeditions or, maybe they can get through to Tim through there. But yeah, get to Uganda, huh?
Yeah, great place.
Thanks, Tim. Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Tim.
Bye, everyone.